I still remember that day so vividly. The spring sunlight was streaming through the windows of Mayo Clinic Hospital. It was just another ordinary day. As a pediatric nurse, I was going about my usual duties, surrounded by children's smiling faces. Parents and children were walking down the hallways, and I could hear young voices from the waiting room. That's when a sharp pain suddenly struck my abdomen. As I tried to stand up with patient charts in hand, my vision went dark for a moment. "Caroline, the baby's coming." I heard Jane, my colleague, calling out from somewhere far away. I was 39 weeks pregnant, with just 1 week until my due date. Everything felt like a dream until I found myself lying in a hospital bed as a patient. The scent of white linens, the steady beeping of monitors, and the waves of contractions reminded me that this moment was real. Thomas rushed over from his construction company in Paradise Valley. Usually dressed in a suit, he burst into the room with his white shirt collar disheveled. I still remember the warmth of his large hands holding mine, how comforting it felt. Sweat beaded on his forehead, and his eyes showed a mixture of love and anxiety as he looked at me. "It's all right, Caroline. I'm here with you." His words reminded me of our first meeting 3 years ago. That day, as a successful construction company president, he had come to make a donation to the pediatric ward where I worked. He donated a playroom for children fighting serious illnesses. That was how we met. I was drawn to his kindness and sincerity, and he understood my passion for my work. On our days off, we would walk around Camelback Mountain or enjoy picnics at the Desert Botanical Garden. Our love grew gradually under the hot Phoenix sun. 6 months into our relationship, one night after dinner at the Cheesecake Factory, Thomas pulled the car over to the shoulder and confessed with a serious expression. "I don't want to keep secrets from you. I have an ex-wife," he said. His honesty made me trust him even more. Then came his proposal. In front of the fountain at Kierland Commons, he got down on one knee. "Let's start a new family together," he said. Those words marked the beginning of our new life. 12 hours of labor. It felt both long and short. Although I had attended many births as a nurse, experiencing becoming a mother myself was completely different. Thomas stayed by my side the whole time, holding my hand. "Almost there, you can do it," his words of encouragement gave me strength. And finally, our precious Sophie was born. A tiny 6-pound life. Tears streamed down my face when I heard her first cry. When I held her for the first time, I was overwhelmed with the desire to protect her forever. When Sophie's tiny fingers gripped mine, the reality of becoming a mother enveloped me completely. Her soft breathing, the scent of milk, her warm body temperature. Everything felt so precious. "We've been waiting for you, Sophie," I whispered to her while preparing for discharge. Starting our new life as a family of 3. Everything was ready in our apartment at the residences at Mountain View to welcome the baby. The crib Thomas had assembled on his day off, the tiny clothes we'd prepared, the sterilized bottles. My heart was full of excitement for our new life ahead. "Let's go home, you two," Thomas said gently while pushing the stroller. When we left the hospital, the Arizona sun embraced us warmly. At 2 p.m., the sky was crystal clear, and the spring breeze felt pleasant against my cheeks. Thomas showed an apologetic expression, saying he needed to return first for an important construction project meeting. "I've called a taxi for you. Get home safely," he said, giving Sophie a gentle kiss on her head before hurrying away. As I got into the white hybrid taxi, the white-bearded driver gave me a gentle smile. "What a beautiful little girl. How old is she?" Responding to his kind inquiry through the rearview mirror, I couldn't help but smile. "She's 3 days old," I answered while gazing at Sophie's sleeping face in her car seat. She was breathing peacefully like an angel, and my heart warmed every time her tiny lips moved. Passing Desert Ridge Marketplace, familiar scenery flowed past the window. As the spire of Scottsdale Bible Church came into view, and beyond it the residences at Mountain View Building appeared, something began to feel off in my heart. The building's exterior looked the same as always. The 24-hour security booth. The neat row of luxury cars, Mercedes and BMWs. Everything seemed normal, yet something felt wrong. "Are you feeling all right?" the driver asked with concern. I nodded slightly and replied, "Yes, thank you, I'm fine," but the unease in my chest wouldn't go away. "Take care," the taxi driver said as he saw us off, and I carefully cradled Sophie. Her soft warmth gave me comfort. Entering the underground parking garage, I noticed the red light on the security camera was off. I headed to the elevator we usually use, but it wasn't working. There was a note, "Under maintenance today," hastily written in ballpoint pen on slightly aged paper. This too seemed off somehow. With no choice, I decided to use the emergency stairs. As I climbed, the feeling of unease grew stronger. The usual sounds of residents were strangely absent. At this time of afternoon, I would normally run into Jessica from the 3rd floor returning from her jog, or the Watsons taking their poodle for a walk. Just before reaching the 2nd floor, Sophie let out a small cry. I instinctively held her tighter and gently soothed her. Following what I'd learned at the hospital, I patted her back softly. At that moment, a chill ran down my spine. A sensation of being watched made my neck tingle. As if someone's eyes were watching us from the shadows of the stairwell. I turned around, but no one was there. Only the shadows of the stairwell stretched ominously. The shadows cast by sunlight through the windows seemed to take on human shapes. "It's just my imagination," I muttered to myself as I stepped into the hallway leading to room 203. Maybe postpartum fatigue was making me oversensitive. But this anxiety felt different from mere tiredness. That's when I noticed a white piece of paper stuck to our apartment door. At first, I thought it might be a notice from the building manager. A reminder about overdue rent or notice of some maintenance work. But as I got closer, I could see it was hastily handwritten. "Do not enter. Call the police immediately." The words written in black ballpoint pen showed a trembling yet determined hand. As if the writer had been torn between fear and duty. the trembling at the edges of the letters, yet written large and legibly enough to read. Whoever wrote this was desperately trying to tell me something. At that moment, Sophie let out a loud cry. Was she hungry, or had she sensed my distress? Her crying echoing through the hallway made this abnormal situation feel all the more real. My hands were shaking. Even trying to take out my smartphone, my fingers wouldn't move as I wanted. While firmly holding Sophie with my left arm, I desperately tried to tap the screen with my right hand. After several failed attempts, I finally managed to reach the emergency call button. A calm female operator's voice answered. There's a note on my door. The words wouldn't come out properly. I have a baby with me. We just got discharged from the hospital. Suddenly, I thought I heard a noise from inside the apartment. Something falling, or being dragged. Was someone inside? Were they lying in wait for us? I instinctively backed up against the wall. Sophie's crying was getting louder. The fluorescent lights in the hallway began to flicker irregularly, casting our distorted shadows on the floor. We're sending patrol cars right away. Please don't move from where you are. The operator's voice seemed to fade away. My ears started ringing from tension. The air in the hallway suddenly felt heavy. Time seemed to stand still. Then another sound came from inside the room. This time I clearly heard footsteps. Just then, the door of the neighboring apartment opened, and John Murphy, the former police officer I always exchanged greetings with, appeared. His usually calm expression was filled with a tension I had never seen before. Sweat beaded on his deeply wrinkled forehead, and he seemed to be gripping something shiny in his hand. "Caroline, don't go inside." His voice was low and warning. "I've already called the police. I wrote that note." The sound of sirens I'd been hearing in the distance was getting closer. I stood next to Murphy, still holding Sophie tightly to my chest. "Stay calm, Caroline." His low voice carried the authority of his former police officer days. "I'll explain everything." A few minutes later, heavily equipped police officers came running up the stairs. The tall officer in the lead quickly assessed the situation. "I'm Detective Mike Johnson. Is everyone all right?" The officer approached us while calmly surveying the surroundings. "I'm John Murphy. I made the call." Murphy stepped forward. Around 1:30 p.m., I witnessed a suspicious woman entering the building. Something was off about her. It was as if... He continued, choosing his words carefully. As if she was possessed by something. Murphy's testimony was surprisingly detailed. The woman was in her late 30s, with flashy blonde hair, wearing expensive designer clothes. However, despite her appearance, she was clearly distraught. Furthermore, she seemed unusually familiar with the building's security system and had managed to disable the cameras under the pretense of maintenance. "She definitely broke into room 203, Murphy continued. As a retired police officer, I instinctively sensed danger. However, I hesitated to call the police without concrete evidence. He looked at me apologetically. So I at least wrote the warning, hoping Caroline would notice when she returned. Detective Johnson requested backup over his radio and began taking detailed statements from us while waiting for the special team to arrive. With a trembling voice, I told them about Thomas's ex-wife, Rachel Smith, a former fashion model who had remained obsessed with Thomas after their divorce. However, she had recently disappeared from sight, and we had almost forgotten about her. "Is the baby all right?" a female officer asked gently. Strangely enough, Sophie was sleeping soundly through all this commotion. "Yes, she's fine," I answered while gazing at her sleeping face. "I must protect this child." That thought gradually melted away the fear that had been freezing my heart. Just then, a voice came through the detective's radio announcing the arrival of the Special Operations Team. Elite officers in black uniforms efficiently climbed the stairs. Their movements were precise, as if they had practiced this countless times. "We'll check inside," the detective told us. "Please evacuate to a safe location." Just as the Special Operations Team leader was carefully trying to open the door with a master key, we all heard a distinct sound. Someone was moving inside. The officers' expressions changed instantly. The leader gave hand signals to his team, and they all readied their weapons. Then, they quickly opened the door. A few seconds of silence. Then the sound of something falling inside. A woman's scream-like voice. The officers swiftly entered the room. Those of us left in the hallway watched with bated breath as events unfolded. Then one officer came out to the hallway, his face pale. "Detective, you need to see this." His voice clearly showed his disturbance. Detective Johnson quickly went inside. When he returned, his expression was perhaps the most severe of his 13-year career. "Ma'am, let's have you stay at a hotel tonight," the detective continued, carefully choosing his words. "We need to secure the scene. And, for your and your daughter's safety." A chill ran down my spine. What was happening inside the room? And what had Rachel been planning to do? Murphy placed his hand on my shoulder. "My wife will drive you. We'll contact Thomas right away." At that moment, Sophie woke up and started to whimper. While instinctively soothing her, I stared at our apartment door. Now many officers were going in and out, camera flashes lighting up the scene. The sensation of our family's peaceful daily life crumbling silently. For my exhausted postpartum mind, it was too cruel a reality. "Thomas." I whispered my husband's name softly. In a room at the Paradise Valley Hotel and Suites, I gazed out the window while holding Sophie in my arms. Dusk was approaching, and the Phoenix cityscape was beginning to turn red. The ridge of Camelback Mountain was illuminated by the setting sun, as if it were on fire. Suddenly, there was a knock at the door. When I opened it, Thomas burst in, his face ashen. His usually well-groomed black hair was disheveled, his tie askew, and sweat stains showed on his shirt. He must have rushed over straight from his meeting after getting the call. "Are you all right, Sophie?" He held us tightly. I could feel his arms trembling. "The police called. Rachel." Thomas's voice broke off. His eyes showed anxiety and guilt I had never seen before. "Sit down," I said quietly. Sophie was sleeping contentedly in her father's arms. Thomas let out a deep sigh before opening his mouth heavily. "I should have told you more. About Rachel, in more detail." His confession far exceeded my imagination. Rachel and Thomas's married life had appeared glamorous on the surface. A beautiful former fashion model wife and a successful young construction company executive. They were the envy of social circles, seen as an ideal couple. However, the reality was different. She wanted children. But, Thomas continued, choosing his words carefully, after multiple miscarriages, after the last failure, she began to become mentally unstable. That was 3 years ago. Rachel suddenly started claiming she was pregnant. But it was her delusion. Hospital tests showed no pregnancy. Still, she believed there was a baby in her womb and began preparing for childbirth. I decided on divorce when she tried to. Thomas closed his eyes painfully. She caused a scene trying to take someone else's baby at a park. After the divorce, Rachel was seeing a psychiatrist for counseling for a while. However, about 6 months ago, she suddenly stopped all contact. Last year, she started stalking me, Thomas continued. Waiting outside the company, following me home. But there wasn't enough evidence to report to the police. Just then, the hotel room phone rang. It was Detective Johnson. "Mr. and Mrs. Green," the detective's voice resonated heavily. "We have Rachel Smith in custody. And I'd like to report about the situation inside the room." 30 minutes later, the detective visited our room. His expression was more serious than ever. "We found quite an unusual situation inside," the detective chose his words carefully. "On the crib, we found old wedding photos of you and Mr. Green. However, Mrs. Green's face had been cut out." I gasped involuntarily. Thomas's hand gripped my shoulder more tightly. Furthermore, the detective continued, "We found a large quantity of baby items. New diapers, bottles, baby clothes, and a collage of baby pictures. Covering an entire wall." The detective took out his tablet and showed us photos from the scene. My hands trembled. Dozens of baby pictures were pasted on the wall. They were all cut out from the internet and magazines. And in the center, a photo of me and Sophie from the hospital. "She seems to have gained access to the maternity ward by posing as hospital staff," the detective explained quietly. "That's probably how she obtained the photo of you and your daughter." Even more frightening facts came to light. When Rachel broke into our apartment, she had prepared everything needed to take the baby. A baby carrier, bottles, and forged passports. She was going to. "Sophie." My voice trembled. Thomas held me tightly. "I need to tell you about the circumstances of Ms. Smith's arrest as well," the detective continued. "When the special operations team entered, she was in front of the crib, holding a baby doll. And she was screaming." The detective hesitated for a moment. This child should have been mine. Thomas's baby should have been mine. We wouldn't be able to enter our apartment for a while as evidence was being collected. Rachel's fingerprints were found throughout the room, and security footage showed her disabling the security system. We have complete evidence, the detective said firmly. She will be charged and receive appropriate treatment. Thomas let out a deep sigh. I should have paid more attention to her care back then. But I was so caught up in work. His voice was tinged with deep regret. Just then, Sophie began to cry softly. She must be hungry. I lifted my daughter and prepared a bottle. The feeling of her tiny hand gripping my finger. Her warm temperature. Her steady breathing. Everything felt precious. Outside the window, the sun had completely set, and Phoenix's night view spread out before us. The spire of Scottsdale Bible Church was lit up, its light seeming to reach our room. Thank you, I whispered, kissing Sophie's head. Mr. Murphy's quick thinking. The police's swift response. And gratitude for being able to protect this child. Everything welled up, and tears flowed from my eyes. Thomas gently embraced us. It's all right now. I won't let anyone hurt you too. A year has passed since then. Room 203 at the residences at Mountain View is now filled with warm laughter. Sophie crawls all around the room, and I chase after her. Such scenes have become our daily life. Daddy's home, I call out in the evening, and Sophie happily babbles of Papa, Papa. Having Papa as her first word has become Thomas's greatest pride. Since that day, we've overcome many things. For the first few weeks, we attended trauma counseling regularly. In the warm atmosphere of Desert Behavioral Health Clinic, I gradually learned to put my fears into words. Thomas attended with me, and together as husband and wife, as parents, we considered how to process this experience. We can't change the past, but we can create our future together. The words of our counselor, Jennifer, still remain in my heart. Our relationship with the Murphys has grown deeper. Every Sunday afternoon, they invite us for dinner. Amid the aroma of Arizona-style chili beans and cornbread, Mr. Murphy tells interesting stories from his police days, and his wife Grace treats us to homemade apple pie. I'm truly grateful that my police instincts were right that day, Mr. Murphy often says. Grace adds with a gentle smile, your instincts saved this child's life. Sophie's first birthday party became a celebration for the entire community. The courtyard of the residences at Mountain View was filled with dishes brought by residents, and children's laughter echoed throughout. What a lovely party! Detective Johnson attended with his family too. He's now one of our close friends. Sometimes he stops by during his patrol rounds and gives Sophie toy police badges. As for Rachel, she's receiving treatment at the State Psychiatric Center. According to the medical team, she was suffering from severe delusional disorder. They determined she needed long-term inpatient treatment. She still believes my family should be hers, Thomas said quietly while reading reports from the center. But she can't hurt us anymore. Indeed, her actions were unforgivable. However, as time passed, my anger gradually turned to pity. Perhaps her strong desire to have children had driven her to extremes. During Sunday service at Scottsdale Bible Church, I sometimes pray for her, for healing and peace to come to her. Perhaps this is the only form of compassion I can offer as a mother. And now, our family has a new life growing within. You're going to be a big sister, Sophie. When I tell her this, she puts her tiny hand on my belly with a puzzled expression. She probably doesn't understand yet, but our family is definitely growing bigger. This morning too, while looking at baby items at Desert Ridge Marketplace, Sophie happily picked up tiny socks. My heart warms as she looks up at me. As we await the birth of our new life, I feel our bonds growing even stronger. Thomas helps prepare the second baby's room between his work commitments. We talk late into the night about what color to paint the walls, what furniture to place. Maybe it'll be a boy this time, Thomas says hopefully. But whether it's a girl or boy, this child will certainly grow up surrounded by love. Outside the window, Camelback Mountain's ridge is tinted by the sunset. The same view as that day last year. But my heart is filled with completely different emotions now. Not anxiety or fear, but hope and anticipation, and above all, deep gratitude. Sophie sits on my lap, opening her favorite picture book. Goodnight Moon, she never seems to tire of it, squealing with delight each time she turns a page. I can hear Thomas preparing dinner in the kitchen. The aroma of his specialty, lasagna, fills the room. This weekend, we plan to invite the Murphys to celebrate our new life. Mama, Sophie suddenly looks up at me. In my arms, she shows a completely content expression. Mama's right here, I hold my daughter tightly. Our story has only just begun. We don't know what events await us ahead. But I'm truly happy that I can move forward, step by step, with this beloved family. Outside, the spring breeze was beginning to blow gently, as if announcing the arrival of a new season.